In 1929, about 80 men built the highest bridge on Earth across a canyon in Colorado, and no part of it was built up from the ground. The Royal Gorge runs 955 feet deep where the bridge crosses it. The north wall drops nearly vertically for 700 feet. At the bottom, the canyon squeezes to about 30 feet wide, and the Arkansas River fills all of it. Nothing went into that riverbed. No piers, no scaffolding, no false work. It was too deep to reach from below, so nobody tried. Which leaves one question. If you cannot work up from the river, and no man can throw a line 900 feet, how do you get the first strand across? The crew was mostly general laborers, not trained engineers. 6 months over open air, no safety nets at any point. The casualty list at the end is not the one you would expect. And the bridge goes nowhere. It was built purely as a tourist attraction, and it held the world record for 72 years. I am going to rebuild that construction in order. The 2 towers that do not match. The cable that came up from the bottom of the canyon. The rig that crawled out along it. The deck that grew toward its own middle over nothing. None of that was photographed from an angle that explains it, so I worked from the written accounts, the drawings and the 1930 Engineering News Record report, and used advanced AI to put the sequence back the way it ran. The gorge is Precambrian granite and gneiss, cut by the Arkansas River over roughly 10 miles. In places it runs more than 1,200 feet deep. The rock does not weather into slopes. It stands up in walls. By the 1870s, sightseers were reaching the rim by horseback and buggy. Contemporary accounts describe them crawling to the edge on hands and knees because there was no safe place to stand. The bottom of the canyon was worth fighting over long before the top was. Between 1878 and 1880, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, and the Denver and Rio Grande fought in court and on the ground for the right-of-way along the canyon floor, the shortest route to the Silver at Leadville. The court settled it in 1880 in the Rio Grande's favor. That left an engineering problem. At one point, the floor narrows to under 50 feet, with no room beside the river for track. In 1879, the engineer C. Shaler Smith wedged an A-frame between the rock walls and hung a 3-girder span roughly 300 feet long from its apex. 2 years earlier, he had built the world's first cantilever railroad bridge over the Kentucky River. His hanging bridge still sits at the bottom of the gorge, almost 1,000 feet directly below where the suspension bridge would later cross. Theodore Roosevelt rode over it by train in 1905. People kept proposing a crossing at the top, and nobody could finance one. A promoter offered an electric sightseeing railway to the rim, with a walking surface of glass laid over a girder. It was never built. A concessionaire offered a footbridge in exchange for a 15-year contract and missed his deadline. In 1906, Congress granted the gorge and the land around it to Cannon City, signed by Roosevelt. By 1925, there was a restaurant and a viewing platform on the rim, and a standing conclusion among everyone who stood there. Somebody should bridge it. Nobody could say how. In 1928, a bridge builder and toll crossing promoter from San Antonio, named Lon P. Piper, came to look at the gorge. He left saying he could build across it, not a footbridge, a 2-lane automobile bridge. His confidence came from recent work. Piper had just finished 4 bridges across the Rio Grande on the Texas-Mexico border. Those were river crossings, with ground on both banks and water in between. This was granite on both sides, and nothing but air in between. Quick pause. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're finding this interesting, a like goes a long way. He formed the Royal Gorge Bridge and Amusement Company to finance the job. The terms were plain. A 20-year lease on city land, $1,000 a year to Cannon City cut to $500 in hardship years. Another $200 a year went to the railroad for the airspace above its tracks at the bottom of the canyon. George E. Cole was hired as chief engineer and general superintendent, and his own construction firm took the work. Locally, he became known as the father of the bridge. The crew was largely general laborers. The ironworkers handling the cables wore helmets. One man is identified by name in the surviving construction photographs, Charles Driesel, who came in from out of town for the job. Nobody wrote down who the rest were. Before a single piece of steel moved, Cole's team had to build the conditions for building. The primitive roads to the rim were improved. A new access road was cut to the south rim. Power lines were run out to the site. Every supply came in over ground that had carried buggies and not much else. The steel came from Colorado Fuel and Iron in Pueblo. The budget on paper was $250,000. Groundbreaking was the 5th of June, 1929. The towers went up first, bolted steel, anchored directly into the granite at each rim. There was no falsework holding them, and nothing rose from below to meet them. The rock did the work. They are not a matching pair. One rises 150 feet. The other rises 110. The rims are not mirror images, and Cole built to what the canyon actually offered, rather than to what would have been convenient to draw. That decision runs through the entire structure. The side spans are unequal as well, one at 190 feet and the other at 130. The anchorages sit exposed at the outer ends of those spans, above ground, where the individual wires of each main cable terminate. Every one of them was built by wrapping steel wire around steel pipes embedded in concrete. What Cole had, once the towers stood, was 2 steel frames on opposite rims with roughly 900 feet of open air between them, and no way to get so much as a string across. The solution went downward. 2 half-inch steel cables were lowered from the rims, one down the north wall and one down the south, paid out until both ends reached the river. Crews working at the riverbed, nearly 1,000 feet below the men above them, spliced the 2 ends together into a single line. A steam winch on the rim then hauled the joined cable back up. That spliced cable became the carrier line for everything that followed. Every wire, every ton of steel, the entire deck, all of it traces back to 2 cable ends joined by hand at the bottom of a canyon. With the carrier line anchored, the spinning began. Workers pulled galvanized number 9 steel wire across the void, 1 strand at a time, 4,200 wires in all. 2,100 were bundled into each of the 2 main cables. There is no photograph of a single pass being made. The reconstruction has to work backwards from the finished cable, the same number of individual crossings of the same span. Each wire hauled out, seated in the strand, and the carriage hauled back for the next. It is the least dramatic footage imaginable, and the most important month of the whole build. One thing was deliberately left out. The deck would carry no vertical stiffening truss, and nothing would hang beneath it. For a suspension span of that size, the omission was unusual, and it is the reason the bridge visibly moves when wind comes up the canyon. The cables were up. The towers were anchored. What still did not exist was anything a person could stand on. To hang a deck from a cable, you first have to reach the cable. Cole's team built a rig that traveled along the main cables themselves, and it could adjust for both width and height at every point along the span. That adjustment mattered more than it sounds. A suspension cable is a curve, not a line. It hangs lowest near the center and rises toward the towers, and because the towers are different heights, that low point does not fall at the middle. The 2 cables also run closer together at some points along the span than at others. Every suspender had to be attached at a different height and at a different spacing from the one before it. A fixed rig would have been correct in exactly one place and wrong everywhere else. No detailed photograph of that machine appears to survive. What it did is described, and what it had to accommodate is measurable from the finished bridge. The reconstruction is built backwards from those 2 things. The deck grew outward from both rims toward the middle. 8-inch beams were connected to the suspenders with 8-inch cable stringers to form a bolted steel frame. 1 girder at a time, each piece set into place over open air. 100 tons of steel went into the floor system. Then came the planking. 1,292 Oregon fir planks laid across the frame with a gap left between each one. The gap was deliberate. It let snow fall through instead of piling up, and it let wind pass through instead of pushing against a solid surface. It also meant anyone standing on the finished deck could look down between the boards at the river. The finished deck was 18 feet wide, built for 2 lanes of automobile traffic across a canyon no road had ever needed to cross, and rated to carry 2 million pounds. The men doing this work had nothing beneath them. Cole required every worker to wear shoes fitted with suction cup soles, and he enforced 2 standing rules. Always shuffle your feet, never look down. That was the safety system, And it is worth being precise here. Safety nets were not standard practice on American bridges in 1929. The first one, strung under a major American span, went up on the Golden Gate 7 years later, in 1936. It caught 19 men before a falling scaffold tore straight through it in February 1937 and killed 10. Cole's crew was not cutting a corner. The corner did not exist yet. Nobody died. There were no serious injuries either across the whole build. Visitors drove out to the rim daily to watch it happen. The attraction was drawing crowds before the bridge existed. The timeline is worth laying out plainly. Groundbreaking. The 5th of June, 1929. Wall Street collapsed in late October, while the bridge was still being finished. Construction ended in November. The formal dedication and public opening came on the 8th of December, 6 weeks after the crash. The final cost was $350,000 against a budget of $250,000, roughly $5 million in today's money. A crowd came out for the dedication and cars crossed the deck. Admission ran 50 cents for an adult and 25 for a child. On paper, Piper was in an extraordinary position. He held the highest bridge on Earth, and by June 1931 he had added the longest and steepest funicular in North America beside it, 3-foot narrow gauge running 1,550 feet, down a 45-degree grade to the river. In practice, he had opened both into the Great Depression, and then the war took away what recovery the late 30s had brought. The federal government urged Americans not to travel. The railroads urged the public not to ride, so the trains could carry troops. Piper owned a tourist attraction that could only be reached by traveling, in a country being told not to. He sold out in 1947 to a group of Fremont County businessmen who thought the bridge was too valuable an institution to lose. The post-war bet was correct. Piper had simply made it 18 years early. Then the bridge itself came due. Between 1980 and 1984, under Chief Engineer Frank L. Stahl, the structure went through a full rehabilitation. This was the harder of the two builds in one specific sense. In 1929, Cole was assembling a bridge that did not yet exist. In 1980, the contractor had to replace the load-carrying parts of a bridge that was already standing, already stressed, and still hanging over the same 955 feet of nothing. All 4 cable anchorages were replaced. The last 100 feet of each cable end was replaced, wire by wire, spliced into the original 1929 steel. Look closely at the cables today, and the joint is visible. Brown wire from 1929, running into gray wire from the rebuild. Every suspender rope was replaced. 2 wind cables were installed beneath the deck for the first time, anchored at 4 new points, one of which required its own truss tower. Then the whole structure was repainted. The contractor was Willalum International of Muskogee, Oklahoma. The finished bridge was rated for winds of 125 miles an hour. The work cost more than $2.8 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is more than the bridge had cost to build. It cost more to fix than to make. Visitors who crossed before that work described the bridge swaying in high wind. That was not a defect. There had never been a stiffening truss, and never a wind cable. The 1929 bridge moved because it was built to. A section of the original northeast anchorage was deliberately preserved during the rebuild. Original wire still wrapped around its pipes. It is still there, and it is the piece of 1929 anchoring you can still put your hand on. The bridge and the incline railway were listed on the National Register of Historic Places on the 2nd of September 1983. On the 11th of June 2013, a man-made wildfire jumped the gorge and burned 3,218 acres. 48 of the park's 52 buildings were destroyed. The aerial tram was lost, the incline railway badly damaged. Nobody was hurt. The bridge survived because it is steel and rock anchored, with only its deck able to burn. Roughly 100 of its planks needed replacing, out of 1,292. The visitor center built to replace the ruins is clad in boards salvaged from that fire, burn marks still showing. One more thing the bridge had to give up. For 80 years it was advertised at 1,053 feet, a figure measured from the top of the towers down to the riverbed, rather than from the deck to the water. In 2010, the bridge historian Eric Sikowski put a laser rangefinder on it and came back with 955. The park remeasured after hearing his result and produced a third number, 969. The advertised figure was not exactly a lie. It also was not necessary. The bridge was the highest in the world by a wide margin, and nobody needed to round up. The record it took had belonged since 1912 to the Sidi Mechid Bridge in Constantine, Algeria, a road crossing 575 feet above the Rumel. Royal Gorge did not beat it. It almost doubled it. The record went eventually. In 2001, the Liuguanghe Bridge in China took the title of highest bridge, and the highest suspension bridge followed 2 years later. In September 2025, China opened the Huajiang Canyon Bridge, its deck 2,051 feet above the water, more than twice the height of the Gorge crossing. The Royal Gorge Bridge is still the highest bridge in the United States. More than 26 million people have visited it since 1929. And it is still being built. About 300 deck planks are replaced every year, which means the surface you walk on is never more than a few seasons old, hanging from cable that went across the canyon one wire at a time in the summer of 1929. 80 men, 4,200 wires, 2 towers that do not match on a canyon that was never going to offer a matching pair.
If this got your attention, hit subscribe and give the video a like. And tell me in the comments which vanished build or impossible crossing I should reconstruct next.